Although Hollywood is known for producing heroes, not all of them manage to maintain their hero status after leaving the set. And nobody exemplifies that more than Gary Sinise. He became famous to millions of people all around the globe thanks to his role as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. Symbolism, emotional depth, and empathy were the laudations bestowed upon this career-defining performance. Behind the scenes, though, Gary C. endured a hellish existence that no movie could ever hope to depict. He fought cancer with his wife. His kid, who was 33 years old at the time of his death, had a rare form of cancer, became progressively immobile, and died away. After turning down parts and leaving Hollywood, Gary became a caregiver, stepping away from the limelight. He never once spoke to the media or begged for sympathy throughout the nearly 6 years he remained silently by his son's side. Not out of pity but to do something that shocked everyone, he spoke up only after his kid died. Actor Gary Sinise is expanding his career. Not on television, but in real life, he has fully accepted the biggest role of his life, that of a father and soldier. In reality, what transpired with Gary C? How could he confront such a harsh reality? Gary C., a silent hero who carries the burdens of a parent and a warrior in his heart, is the protagonist of this novel. Blue Island is a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, where Gary Sinise was born in 1955. His mom taught school, and dad shot documentaries. Gary felt disconnected throughout his upbringing, which was characterized by a lack of memorable experiences. He was the type of student who, if born in the modern era, would most certainly be labeled with a learning disorder due to his inability to concentrate and comprehend new material. Not only was he not great at anything, but he was also a terrible reader and writer. However, he excelled in one area, daydreaming. Highland Park, a northern suburb of the city, was the new home for his family when he was 9 years old. Gary was always adjusting to new places and new students. His feelings of alienation were only exacerbated by switching schools. As he began to feel like an outsider, his grades plummeted and he became increasingly reclusive. The unexpected breakout occurred in the hallway of a secondary school. The acting teacher casually mentioned, "I'm directing West Side Story," as he passed by one day while Gary and his rock bandmates stood playing guitar. "All of you resemble gang members. Please come try out for the role." Despite his lack of enthusiasm for the theater, the failing student agreed to participate after he saw a long queue of attractive women waiting outside the audition. After that, an unusual occurrence occurred. Even though he had no idea what he was reading, Gary's clumsy and awkward performance made everyone in the room chuckle. For the first time ever, he felt like he had accomplished something meaningful after landing a little role. Gary knew he couldn't walk off the stage after his first performance. Theatricality was his lifeline, and he dove headfirst into it. He dedicated his life to the theater, practicing lines, constructing sets, and creating plays, even while his grades stayed low. His credit-to-time ratio was too low for him to graduate with his cohort. To keep acting, nevertheless, he remained for an additional year. Little did anyone anticipate that the struggling student would go on to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Gary Sinise, nevertheless, was never one to let his grades define him. Rather, he was defined by the things he would not give up. No, Gary Sinise did not attend university. He stayed in his hometown rather than rushing to the Big Apple or Hollywood after finishing high school a year late. But he turned around and went back to a Highland Park warehouse, where he and a few others started a theater company called the Steen Wolf. They lacked any kind of official education. No one had any cash on hand. The theater, though, was something they all loved. It was as if it were their one refuge from the outside world, where they could be authentic. At first, they were completely independent, creating storyboards, performing, constructing sets, and arranging seating. On occasion, The crowd numbered barely a few dozen. They still think about the day they played for a classroom full of kids sitting cross-legged on the floor as one of their most formative performances. Gary was more interested in the creative process than in achieving celebrity. The Chicago independent theatrical scene saw Stephen Wolf's meteoric rise to stardom. Critical praise started pouring in for plays directed by Gary, such True West. John Malkovich played the lead in a show that the ensemble presented to New York's Off-Broadway in 1985. At that very second, Stephen Wolf went from being a little-known warehouse troupe to a household name across the country. People began to recognize Gary Sinise as a talented filmmaker. He never left Chicago, though, and he never pursued a career in Hollywood. After almost 15 years on stage, Gary made the transition to film in the 1990s, bringing a classical, contemplative, and introspective acting approach to an industry that was becoming more and more focused on spectacle and rapid succession. He was both the director and the star of the 1992 film of Mice and Men, based on the novel by John Steinbeck. Critical praise was so high for the picture that it paved the way for Gary Sinise to break into Hollywood with a career all his own. He was no stranger. He was the important latecomer worth paying attention to. So a call came in. Lieutenant Dan, a soldier without legs, was being cast by Paramount for the film Forrest Gump. Gary Sinise was certain that this was his destiny-defining job. One of the most groundbreaking films of the 90s, Forrest Gump had its premiere that year. 6 Oscars went to the picture. Beyond Tom Hanks's innocent Woodland, another figure made a lasting impression on moviegoers. Lieutenant Dan, the brave soldier who tragically lost his legs and his determination to survive. The actor's performance was more than simply lip service. He gave the character his all by incorporating his own humanity, wisdom, and hardships. He had Dan wear his brother-in-law's rosary, who had served in the Vietnam War, throughout the film. Through Dan's resentful, furious, and then peaceful stare, he absorbed the society's pitying glances, distance, and eerie feeling of forgetfulness toward returning warriors. All of Gary's professional life was changed by this part. He was widely acknowledged and nominated for an Academy Award. Gary could have used that to land a major role, but he stuck to supporting roles in films like Mission to Mars, Ransom, The Green Mile, and Apollo 13. His few cinematic appearances were all memorable, for the simple reason that Gary opted to remain authentic rather than seek celebrity. He also had great success in television. The 9-season crime drama CSI, New York, in which he starred from 2004 to 2013, was watched by millions of people across the world. It was as if Taylor, the figure, were a real-life counterpart to Gary, a man of discipline, reserve, and principle. His ultimate goal, meanwhile, was never to become a famous actor. Gary started advocating for veterans' rights immediately after Forrest Gump. The disabled veterans of the United States invited him to give a speech 1 month following the film's debut. He came to the realization that the suffering endured by actual soldiers was considerably more severe than what was depicted in media. In that instant, Gary embarked on his second adventure. This time around, it will be as a friend and advocate for heroes, injured warriors, and families of Gold Star recipients. For the benefit of more than 500 military installations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the United States, as well as VA hospitals, he assembled the Lieutenant Dan Band. Hollywood wasn't brought to the troops by him. Solidarity and respect were his gifts. The Gary Sinise Foundation was established in 2011 by him with the goal of providing assistance to those who have served in the military, law enforcement, emergency medical services, and their families. By the year 2024, the foundation will have raised hundreds of millions of dollars for rehabilitation, scholarships, and job training programs, as well as constructed 80 free homes for troops with life-threatening injuries. Additionally, they will have paid for over 10,000 trips for families of gold. All the while, Gary accompanied him. His lifelong companion Moira was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer in January 2017, interrupting his ability to catch his breath. She had 8 rounds of chemotherapy and 35 days of radiation treatment in a row, during which she suffered from nausea, fatigue, hospitalization, and eventual recovery. She was never alone with Gary. In May of 2018, as the storm appeared to have subsided, a doctor contacted Gary. As they sat on the porch, he and his wife talked about her upcoming therapy. He was informed by the doctor that Mac, his youngest son, had a big tumor on his sacrum. "I was diagnosed with chordoma, a rare kind of cancer that is infamously tough to cure, after experiencing what appeared like pelvic pain following a bike accident. The illness may go undiagnosed for a long time before it manifests." When Mac charged into the fray, nobody was ready. In September 2018, the initial procedure was carried out. After appearing to be stable for some time, the cancer reappeared in May of this year, this time much more quickly, aggressively, and difficult to manage. 2 significant spinal procedures were performed on Mac in 2020. His mobility was severely limited due to 2 injuries, one in the cervical spine and one in the thoracic spine. Skeletal segments were extracted and fastened using rods and screws. Slowly but surely, he lost the capacity to walk, bend, or move his head. His right upper body was paralyzed after the second operation. He could barely flex his wrists with his right hand, but his left hand still had some sensation. Max spent half of the first 8 months of 2020 in the hospital. Gary, who was still in the midst of a TV program and performing commitments, made the announcement that he was scaling back. "Right now, I'm too sick to leave the house. Just a dad here." He was not on television for 5 years. Silently making his way through hospital corridors, a man pushes a wheelchair. No new roles, no scandals. But music saved the day for the family. Throughout his life, Mac had been an artist, playing drums for rock bands while at USC and on tour. He was completely helpless at this point. Nevertheless, his mom Moira said, "If you can't play drums, try the harmonica." And Max, using only one hand and his breath, began over from the very beginning. After beginning work on Arctic Circles while in college, Mac finally decided to complete it in January 2023. To assist him in finalizing the arrangement, an old USC acquaintance named Oliver Schneider traveled to Nashville. A string quartet was engaged. We reserved a studio. Despite being paralyzed below the waist, Max sat in his wheelchair and oversaw the entire recording process. When they heard the piece for the first time at the session, his sister and father were there, and they were all moved to tears. Although Arctic Circles was Mac's last work, it was far from his last. The harmonica his mom had given him was the one he used to record Shenandoah. Subsequently, a whole album, Revival and Resurrection, followed. Just days after the final recording session was finished, on January 5, 2024, Mac passed away. A spectacular funeral was not held by Gary. There was silence from him when it came to the press. 6 weeks down the road, he clandestinely posted a letter detailing the entire ordeal on the website of the Cordham Foundation. Many people read it. Letters were returned by thousands. Other patients with the same rare disease were helped by donations totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Resurrection and Revival, Part 2 was to be his second studio album, and he started by listening to Mac's old tapes again. Gary, a father who had plunged into the darkest grief, finds a way to keep living via the project, which is more than just the final ashes of a talented kid. After relocating to Nashville in 2021 in quest of solace, he probably won't ever leave. Mac didn't go anywhere, he had previously stated. Just for a short time, he's been absent. Perhaps in the future he will return. While many of his contemporaries have left behind a laundry list of accolades and hundreds of main roles, Gary Sinise did neither. But he did not forget anything else. Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump is both a cultural icon and the embodiment of a real-life journey that transcends the confines of that role. Lieutenant Dan, a crippled soldier who was bewildered and furious until finding a way to live again, became a symbol of strength for American soldiers soon after the film's 1994 debut. It wasn't only for this role that Gary received an Oscar nomination. It was a step in the right direction toward healing the long-ignored and oversimplified emotional scars left by war. Still, he wasn't done yet. Gary used his acting career as a means to help people for more than 30 years. As a soldier, he did more than that. He was loyal, unwavering, and selfless in his pursuit of a cause bigger than himself, and he lived his life accordingly. Charity at its core. He established the Gary Sinise Foundation in 2011, which is now of the most influential private organizations in the United States that provides aid to veterans, families of Gold Star recipients, and frontline workers. This includes providing scholarships to the children of dead firemen, constructing 80 smart houses for injured soldiers, and planning free vacations for thousands of grieving families. His presence was never necessary for the completion of any task. All that was required was the assistance of the appropriate individuals. Even in 2019, the organization ran its own plane fleet to transport Gold Star families to their loved ones' funerals. The Snowball Express planes were not about gloating, but rather about sharing in one another's sorrow while carrying white flowers and tears. Gary used to say, "If you have a voice, use it to speak for those who have been forgotten." For these reasons, he has declined innumerable invitations to return to film, act since 2019, stay at home with his son, create music with Mac, and carry on his mission of service. They are the band, the hand, and the voice. Since its inception in 2003, Gary's Lieutenant Dan Band has entertained American service members and their families at more than 500 concerts across the globe. An improvised stage on a military installation, the teary eyes of homesick troops, and music that seemed like an embrace in the midst of battle. No fees, no broadcasts, no sponsors, just the four of them. Together with the band, he helped gather money in 2014 to construct the monument in Washington, D.C., dedicated to the American veterans disabled for life. It was more than a tribute to Gary. It was a watershed moment, evidence that the war's forgotten casualties were finally receiving the respect they deserved. Gary Sinise became an unusual icon of unfaltering personal ethics in an entertainment industry that was becoming more and more rife with scandals, compromises, and political theater. In addition to several creative accolades, including those from the SAG, Golden Globe, and Emmy, he was presented with the Presidential Citizens Medal by President George W. Bush in 2008 and the Bob Hope Medal for Achievement in Entertainment in recognition of his service to the military community. However, a medal might not be the best honor. The fact that he remained on stage after the other performers left is what makes him unique to millions of Americans, particularly veterans, who view him as a member of the family. No amount of Gary Sinise's star power could have written his story, but he lived it to the fullest. Nearly all signs of Gary Sinise's acting career have faded away since 2019. He quit all long-term television commitments, refused offers, and disappeared from film sets. A straightforward explanation was his response to the media's questions. "Please take me home. My loved ones rely on me. This wasn't a choice about retiring. That was up to you." A decision to remain by the side of his loved ones during their most difficult times. Gary took on the role of full-time caregiver for his youngest son Mac as he became weaker following surgeries and chemotherapy. Not a single nurse or other trained expert. In addition to feeding his son spoon by spoon and massaging his sore joints, he personally pushed the wheelchair. He wasn't famous, but he was a dad. The family returned to Nashville, where they had sought solace in 2021, after Mac's death on January 5, 2024. In its place, the new house resounded with the unfinished songs that Mac had composed, rather than with the sounds of film sets or drum practice. After much deliberation, Gary decided to finish them all. He co-produced Mac's second album, Resurrection and Revival Part 2, with lifelong friend and musician Oliver Schneider, barely a few weeks after the funeral. They asked Gary's old bandmates to record, reorganized incomplete scores, opened every file on Mac's laptop, and then brought in an orchestra. Gary was able to work and take care of his wife Moira, whose health was still precarious after undergoing cancer treatment in Nashville. The tour is over for Gary. There will be no more flights to the military bases in Iraq or Afghanistan. Still, he keeps on with his objective in a different way, overseeing the foundation's operations, making tribute songs, and holding informal get-togethers for veterans. Every cent of the album sales went to support the families and individuals affected by the Cordum pandemic, thanks to Gary Sinise Foundation Records. Whenever the question, "Do you think you'll return to acting?" was posed in recent interviews, he responded with a mild smile. "I'm not ruling out the possibility, but I'd rather not be gone for an extended period of time at the moment. Look at me, a grandfather. I would hate to miss taking my grandkids to school in the mornings." Nashville is now Gary Sinise's home away from Hollywood, where he can focus on the things that truly matter: his family, his memories, his appreciation, and his sense of obligation. Even now, he wears the rank of tiny lieutenant and attends military honor ceremonies. The jacket bore the Dan insignia. Continues to use both hands to shake veterans' hands, just as he has done for more than 3 decades. Taking a step back from the limelight may have made Gary a beacon in a world where many celebrities fight for attention. Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump once challenged God by yelling into a furious storm, doubting fate. He managed to pull himself together, stand on prosthetic legs, and finally grin, contented. Nearly 30 years later, Gary Sinise is living that same life, something no one could have predicted. However, no part could adequately portray the experience he went through without special effects, a script, or anyone directing the cut. Turned around from a dyslexic teen who dropped out of high school to become an ardent theater director. After becoming a household name, he went on to spend 6 years confined to his son's hospital bed. From the limelight to the subdued role of legacy builder, Gary Sinise opted for a different route, stepping aside so that someone else may advance, in a world where fame frequently feeds ego. In the same way, he was there for his aging parents, his wife through her radiation treatments, and his son as he weakened and died. And he didn't opt for sadness when Mac departed. In the most solemn way possible, he decided to end on a musical note. Not a single major role or Academy Award required. Gary Sinise's eyes continued to be a symbol, not because he was the center of attention, but because he rallied behind the downtrodden and helped them stand again. Keep this in mind if Lieutenant Dan's performance in Forrest Gump had any emotional impact on you. That guy is legit. He was more than just a hero warrior. Becoming one was his life's work. How do you feel about the incredible trip that Gary Sinise has been on? Out of all his on-screen and off-screen roles, which one did you find most memorable? Feel free to leave a comment with your opinions, and be sure to hit like and subscribe for more motivational content. Please return another time. We appreciate you tuning in.